Hello and welcome back to Downforce Debrief, where we are fresh off the back of the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix. So we're obviously going to be covering that today in great detail and looking ahead, of course, to Monaco as well next weekend. Join with me, as ever, is Mr. Alex Gillen. Alex, come on, straight off the bat, what was your thoughts on the race? Give us a rating, run us through it.
The race, I think, could have been better, honestly. I think it had all the hallmarks to be a really good race, but I felt like it was actually pretty average. Rating, I don't know. It wasn't bad though. It was like a 6. It was a 6 for me. It was maybe slightly above average. It was just interesting enough. I think it helps that we got, teams close to the front and stuff. Obviously, it was so close for pole. Max, in the end, was fairly dominant in the race. Couple of safety cars. I think it was enough to go out there enough for us to talk about today, enough to keep you interested. So I'll go give it a 6 out of 10. What about you?
I'm surprised. I thought it was better. I think the VSC, I can't remember what lap it came out, but the VSC definitely ruined the strategy change that we had around that point. Which, if we're being honest, it probably was a boring one-stop race on paper, but the teams didn't really know that going into it because of how the tires were, which we'll obviously move on to in a little while. But I would give it a 7 out of 10. I think my summary is that it started with promise. The VSC kind of killed it, and then the safety car towards the end then brought it back to life. So, yeah, a bit of a weird one where safety cars killed it and made it. But ultimately, I thought we had some good racing around the mid pack as well, and yeah, different tire offsets towards the end and throughout. I felt made it entertaining, especially considering it's Imola. And I don't know about you, Alex, but I can't really remember the last entertaining Imola race that I've watched. It's certainly in this modern era. So,
but I also I don't recall it. I've got a bad memory, but I don't recall it as being a boring race either. Like I just think it's Imola. It's a good track. It's different to some other tracks. It's good. But yeah, obviously with the tyres being softer, I was thinking we might get a banger, pretty much everyone on a 2-stop. As you said, in the end, most ended up on a 1-stop. In fact, the medium runners were still outpacing the hard runners just before that VSC, weirdly, which is just odd. So it's just a bit strange. It was like it should have been an absolute banger, and it was decent, but like not amazing. And I agree, the safety cars kind of killed it a little bit. It was literally like Creator Series, where we've got like a really interesting strategic battle, and then boom, 2 safety cars. It was still interesting because we had like Piastri running out of tyres, so he couldn't pit. Russell the same. Leclerc frustrated as well for the same reason. So that then made a big offset in tyres. So actually, although the safety cars sort of killed the intrigue of which strategy was going to be best, whether Piastri was going to be able to make that work against Verstappen and Norris and stuff, a 2-stop versus a 1. But actually, in the end, because they ran out of tyres, usable realistically tyres, that period after the safety car ended up being good. We had quite a few overtakes, actually. There was a lot of talk about overtake being really difficult, Imola and stuff, but actually we had quite a lot with the Ferraris coming through. We had Piastri making many overtakes on fresher tyres. At the end there, again, a tyre offset, but more overtakes. There was always like some good chance of an overtake, and it wasn't that long we had to wait until it happened, other than Hamilton on Antonelli in the first half of the race. But other than that, for the most part, the overtakes were possible, but hard. And that's kind of what racing should be all about, right?
Yeah, I completely agree. We had a lot. I expected less overtakes than what we had. Fully agree with that. Were you complaining and unhappy when Antonelli caused the intentional safety car then in Creator Series style towards the end?
Yeah, it was a bit. It was, especially those 2 cars were tiring like the same point. But I haven't actually seen anything afterwards. But they seemed like different causes. One was just like the engine giving up and they told him to pull over. Yeah. The other one, it looked to me like he got on the curb and then it was the curb rattling the car that seemed to make his throttle stop working, which was a bit crazy. But yeah, they just so happened to come out the right points. And I guess now is a good time to bring up a note that I've definitely made for much later in the podcast, is the long safety car we had. So we had a VSC, which I think was 3 or 4 minutes. Then we had a safety car, which was 14 minutes at this more or less the same point in the track. And everyone was like, A, why is this a safety car? The other one's not. And also, why was it so long? And the reason actually is because of the first safety car, which was it Hahn? Was it Behrman that retired first?
It was Ocon.
Oh, it was Ocon. Okay. Oh, so close. But he was obviously quite close to the bit in the barrel where they can get his car out of the way. But then when Antonelli retired in almost the same place, a bit further road, Ocon's car was actually in the way because there wasn't enough space in that bit that they pulled the car off for 2 cars. So they couldn't put Antonelli's car in the same place they put Ocon's car. So then that meant the next place was up the hill. And, it's an F1 car. It's quite light, but still pushing a car up a hill is not easy. So they sort of decided, well, we do kind of need to get a truck out for this, which then necessitated a safety car.
so just to be clear, because the safety cars were miles apart, right? I mean, they were way apart. So they lifted. I'm actually not aware of this myself. When they use the crane and lift the car out from the track, it just stays there at the side. You're saying Ocon's car was still there all those laps later, off track at the side.
Yeah, I'm not 100% on this, but it definitely, it's not uncommon for that to happen, but it would just depend on the track. Like some tracks have got really great service roads and stuff where they can easily just get a truck out and go and get it on the inside of the circuit without needing to interrupt the race. But a lot of the time they can't do that, possibly even just because there's too many fans like running about. Like it's difficult to get a truck through a massively congested fan zone. So a lot of the time what they'll do is they'll leave it there with the marshals, and hope that they don't need to use that escape road again for a different car, which happened in Imola. And then what they'll do at the end of the race is then they'll send a truck out after all the cars have come back to the pits, and before the track invasion, they'll get a truck out normally onto the track to grab that car, bring it back to the pits, and then they do the track invasion. I think that's what the way around they normally do it. So yeah, but it's one of those things, like you said, that it wasn't obvious at the time, because even at the time I was like, why is this a full and the other one was a VSC, and also why is the thing so damn long? It was such a long safety car period. But yeah, it's just one of those things. Just took a bit of time.
It was bad. I didn't know that though. That's really interesting. I feel like each podcast you come out with some interesting little nugget of information. We need to create like a Gillen's fact of the day segment at some point.
You know what? I feel like I don't even know that much, but it's because I love all this stuff, all the weird niche F1 facts that I like pick up over the time. Because I like the facts. It actually go, even though I've got a bad memory, that sort of random stuff goes into my brain, and I'm like, cool. Did you actually remember? After the Canadian Grand Prix, it was a while ago. Do you remember Marshall lost his life after the Canadian Grand Prix? And that was in a similar situation. It was after the race, but they were bringing a car back to the pits that had at some point crashed or retired. So they were doing that with a digger after the race, and then Marshall lost his life. It was maybe like 10 years ago now. It was a little while ago. But that was a similar thing. They were bringing it back after the race for the same reasons. So yeah.
So okay then. So moving on and staying on the topic of the race. Driver of the day. Who was your driver of the day?
Oh, I mean, I've got your notes here, George. I could just steal yours because you've got a great shout. Max Verstappen has to be a good shout for it. I'm not going to steal it, but you are right. Sorry to spoil yours. It kind of should be Max because he was just so good. He just is the best driver in F1, and it's not even close. That's it. Like, I don't think we can say, he had a bad car, maybe like Japan, and he overcame it, yada, yada, because, they had some updates for Imola, and genuinely, Red Bull seemed to not only have the qualifying pace, but also the race pace of McLaren. So I don't think there was really any difference in the cars. But Max is just so good. He's just so rock solid. I mean, look at Piastri, sort of killed his tyres a bit in the first stint, so ended up forcing himself onto a 2-stop, which shafted his race. Norris did all right, but qualified badly. Not that badly, but bad enough that just took him out of contention. And even when he was in clean air, he wasn't able to close Max down. Max is just so rock solid. All these safety cars and stuff that can go wrong. That move in turn one, it should be Max. But I'll let you have Max for your own reasons in a minute. I don't know. It's honestly difficult. Beyond that, for me, it's between Albon, who obviously did unbelievably well in the Williams. He got 5th place, could have possibly even been a podium maybe in different circumstances. I think Hamilton actually recovered really well as well, starting down in, where was it, like 12th or something, to recover to 4th place. The first time he's beaten Leclerc in a race. I think he's a great shout for it. I think Tsunoda did quite well. Pit lane start to P10. I know in general his performances aren't amazing. There's too many people there, I know, but I think all three of them have got a great shout. I'm gonna commit to Hamilton though. I'm gonna pick one, and it's gonna be Hamilton.
Okay. I was going to say, I was just silently sat here grinning that on my notes I've got driver of the day, Max Verstappen, Albon, close second. Those are the first two listed. That was very tactical there.
Okay, I mean, it's not like it's a niche opinion, George. Come on. You've not gone, it's Antonelli, even though he DNF'd, it's this reason. You've picked the most obvious one. But it's true. Max is just the best driver.
Obviously, Hamilton had a really good day. And I was thinking about him when I was making the note for driver of the day. And the reason I didn't go with him is because ultimately he did get very lucky with that initial VSC, which gave him a massive advantage for track position over Leclerc and others behind, which he shouldn't have been there based on strategy before the VSC. But make no mistake, he still drove great and had to make moves at the end. Yes, he was on the better tyres versus Leclerc. Yes, he got the move on Albon because of a controversial turn one, which we'll cover as well. But ultimately that wasn't Hamilton's doing. You know, he just drove as well as he could, and he did have a good race. But for me, it's Max Verstappen. You've already said it. It's he only really had one thing to do, and that was a monster of a move at turn one. I don't know about you, but I was, with how ahead Piastri was into turn one, I was like, oh, okay, this is going to be Piastri driving off into the sunset. See you later, you know, whatever. And then out of nowhere, Verstappen just slingshots around the outside of a corner, which, you know, it's very risky to go on the outside. Obviously, a lot of drivers squeezed wide. Verstappen, Hamilton as well in the 2021. That one stands out. And yeah, Verstappen just so late on the brakes. It's clearly just so much confidence. I think I do also put that a bit down to Piastri. And I said at the time, and I feel like every podcast we bring up this whole Lando Norris Piastri kind of thing. But I said it at the time. I was like, if that was Lando, he would have been slated for that. I feel like Piastri was way too cautious. He was kind of in like championship mode when he was like more than a car ahead. He had that done. He just needed to just drive normally into the corner. He just went so cautiously, worrying about what was going on behind or alongside. So, yeah, but anyway, back to Verstappen. Unbelievable drive. Like I said, he only really had to do that turn one move and then obviously just drive his own race, drive his own pace. And on that note as well, we do need to talk about Red Bull, because where did that come from? We literally watched them at Miami, nowhere on tires. They were awful. I don't know what Max's pace, like, ranking of car pace was in Miami, but it must have been fourth or fifth or quickest or something. And I mean, I think it's safe to say Max was, even if you put Piastri on the same tire life as Max towards the end of that race with a safety car, I think Max still drives away. I think he was just clear. When Lando cleared Piastri, he still didn't gain. You know, Max was clear.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was partly updates from Red Bull, which apparently gave them a bit of a wider setup window, which helped. But I think it was a front right limited circuit, I think. And obviously McLaren's big advantage in Miami was keeping the rear tyres cool. So I do still think if we go to another race that has more rear tyre sensitive, I do still think we see McLaren have the best race pace. But yeah, regardless, as you say, it was that move in turn one was honestly one of the greatest turn one moves of all time. Genuinely, it was looking like he might have dropped down to third, and then just launched around the outside, leaves the perfect amount of room, gets just ahead, so Piastri is forced to give him room, and he pulls it off cleanly. It was unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. Yeah. And
I don't know if did you hear George Russell's reaction as well when he did it? Like
he was annoyed at Piastri, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was like, Piastri, what are you doing? And so it kind of feeds into a little bit of what I was saying, is don't take any credit away from Max whatsoever. But I would, if I was McLaren, or if I was a McLaren fan or whatever, I would definitely be questioning Piastri there of, oh, you probably should have kept that position, mate. You've basically had your pants pulled down by Max.
He did. And I don't know, it's interesting you saying there about, Norris would have got absolutely slated, but it's not because of one bad start that Norris gets slated. He gets slated because he's consistently bad at starts. So if that was one of the many bad starts that Norris had, or cautious starts Norris had, yeah. Piastri isn't necessarily normally like that. Yes, I think he baked about 10 metres earlier than Max and was carrying like 40 kilometres an hour less speed into the corner. Like quite big differences, which is what facilitated it. So yes, it was a small mistake from him. But honestly, imagine the opposite. If he brakes too late, locks a tyre and goes off into the gravel and ends up down in 9th or 10th. Like, you say he's in championship mode, but rightfully so. If he didn't McLaren messed up the strategy, he should have still been comfortably getting P2 there. And realistically, it looked like maybe Max had a bit of a pace advantage. Who knows? I'm not saying Max would have won regardless, because it definitely wasn't as clean cut as that. But, there was a definite chance anyway he was going to lose out to Max. I don't think it was that big a bottle from Piastri. I think Piastri's biggest mistake in the race was just seemingly burning through those tyres a bit quick in the first stint. But honestly, to me, it looked a bit more like McLaren jumped the gun, seeing his tyres starting to go off and pit like about half the grid did. And the other half stuck through it. And then suddenly their pace was genuinely completely fine. And Piastri wasn't, he was losing time to Max in the traffic. And he wasn't Piastri was making some great overtakes, by the way. Like, he was, every single lap, I was like, is he too far back this time? He seemed to be almost holding back a little bit through the first half of the lap, getting just within a second at DRS detection point, then sending it through the final 2 corners, and ended up like less than half a second back on the straight, and then easily getting him DRS. But every single lap, I was like, no, this time he's too far back. And every single lap, he'd get them straight away. So Piastri was actually, it was beautiful racecraft to come through that field. You know, you can't really overtake anywhere else but a DRS zone. So he was waiting to that point. He was not getting too close, so he didn't get too much dirty air, kill his tyres, also not over driving his tyres to do so. So it was actually really smart racing from Piastri after that. But yeah, it was not the best strategy. But yeah, just back to Max. That was an unbelievable turn 1 move.
If you switch those situations around though, we've been saying, and I don't know what podcast it was, but I know we've said about how last season Lando trying to hunt Max for the title, Max or Lando having to take more risks because of the point deficit and yada yada. And now we've got role reverse. So we've basically, from what we said before, is like, oh yeah, Max can drive the way he can, he does aggressively because of the advantage in the championship, because he's got less to lose, blah, blah, blah. He's got more to lose now, and he's still doing this. And I was looking at it in that sense with Piastri, that Piastri's now ahead. Piastri is in the position that Verstappen is always in, or certainly has been in recent history. And yet, look at the difference. Like, I'm not trying to slate Piastri, but I'm just trying to highlight Max's driving, because I think this is a big kind of now if you look at it this way, almost the pressure is on Max, right? He's not in the quickest car, he's behind in the championship, and yet he's like, I don't care, I'm going to drive exactly the same way, maximum risk, within limit, and make those moves.
I agree to some extent, because yes, it was a ballsy move around the outside, I get it, but we're not seeing Max really, though, collide with anyone. We're not seeing him do what he did to Lando in Mexico, where he just ran them both like miles off the track. It was almost a murder attempt. We're not seeing him do anything stupid. There's been no real issues of contact. Yes, that was a great move, but I do agree, Max is still Max. It's not like he's suddenly become really passive, but like, I do think it is still a little bit different to last season. It's not quite as aggressive, and yeah, there's a reason we haven't seen Max DNF, at all, and have any real issues with anyone, and that's because he's dialed it back just enough to the point that he can still do those moves, but now he's got a bit of measurement there, rather than just going, I'm going to send it on you. If we DNF, great, I still need the championship. He hasn't got that bit anymore, so he can't DNF, but he's still doing similar moves. So yeah, it is bad impressive.
Yeah, and you made a very good point about the whole like rear limited circuits favouring McLaren before, and quite right as well. I know we touched on that in the last episode. So it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds. If there are more circuits, or we know there are more circuits, when there are more circuits that are not rear limited, it will be interesting to see if the races play out like this, if Max is going to have a really strong car and be able to probably deliver a lot more wins at those kind of tracks. So I do want to move on and touch on tyres on that note, because this was a big experiment this weekend. C6 compound of tyres made things very interesting. Before we talk about the race and strategies, what did you think of the new tyres, the C6, in qualifying?
Yeah, so I think it was the first time this C6 had been used, and basically it's a tyre that they essentially designed for like street circuits like Monaco and stuff like that. But obviously with us seeing a lot of one-stop races this season, they chose to bring it to Imola, which they wouldn't have otherwise done. It was clear that in qualifying, the tyre wasn't really lasting the lap, and we saw a couple of cars obviously running mediums in qualifying, which is not unheard of, but pretty rare. But to be honest, in the race, I don't know, like, they didn't use the C6 in the race because it did just fall apart too much. But other than that, the next two tyres were still just... We were probably going to get a one-stop, and one-stop was probably the right strategy over the two-stop as well. Like, I don't think it's very likely Piastri would have covered, or any of those guys would have recovered it. You mentioned earlier, actually, that Hamilton got a bit lucky with the VSC, and he did. But, to be honest, I think the two-stop was the wrong strategy, and providing Hamilton was looking after his tyres behind Antonelli, which we don't know how well he was doing, because we never really got long enough to find out, he may have still been able to one-stop to Leclerc's two-stop and still may have beaten him anyway without any safety cars. So I don't think it was all luck. But whereas people like Leclerc were, he made a lot of overtakes at the start. He was pushing hard to get through the pack, but it meant he absolutely munched his tyres. So, yeah, but just a weird one that it was still a one-stop despite that. So honestly, you mentioned it there as like an experiment. I honestly feel like it was failed experiment is harsh, but that is basically the reality of the situation. And I honestly, I think we mentioned before the race, people mentioned the only alternative would be to have a gap in the tyres, to have, instead of the C6, the C5 and the C4, have the C6, the C5 and the C3 or something like that, maybe. So the hard tyre is just that much slower, that much worse. Yes, it lasts forever, but it's just too slow to use. What I will say as well is Imola is a very long pit lane. You know, even though the actual pit lane is a normal length, there's like 200 meters after the garage's end where they're just driving past empty pit lane, which is a must. So it means it is a very slow stop. So maybe that was part of it. But still, yeah, it was still disappointing, wasn't it? To still see one stops mostly, or would have been one stop.
You stole my talking point there. I was literally just going to mention that the second longest pit lane, I think, on the calendar to Silverstone. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's correct. It's around like a 28, 29 second pit stop, which is mad. So I was just going to say that it'd be really interesting if it was like, say, 20 seconds lost at the pits, then, you know, what are we looking like strategy wise then? Because I don't know, you say it's a failed experiment. I disagree. I think I actually tweeted saying that the Mercedes and the Astons in qualifying made Pirelli look silly because they qualified on mediums. Aston cruised to Q3, both cars, which when have they done that this season? Like they were like within 0.2 of the fastest time in Q2 on medium tires. I was like, okay. I tweeted at the time. I was like, right, you know, this is silly. Like, what have they done to the soft tires? But still, we saw then the likes of McLaren, Red Bull, the other teams still running the C6 soft in Q3. Russell missed pole position on medium tires by like just over 1/10, I think it was, which is mad. So fine. But then what that did is we then had C5 medium, C4 hards for the race. So I get your point on maybe they could look at one stage harder on the hard tyres so that they're too slow if they're going to be like, you know, if it's going to be a one stop anyway. Yeah, I don't know. I'd like to think maybe shortening the pit stop or something might have a bigger impact, because then I'm looking at it and thinking, well, they're still not going to use the softs. If the C6 softs are that bad, they're still going to use that C3 hard, and then it's, you know, I don't know. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think for me, it was a good experiment in the end. I'm glad they did it. I'm glad we got to see them at least making an effort to try and not give us a boring one stopper, because from memory, that is what Imola has been, barring like rain or some other circumstances. So yeah, I think, like I said before, my race summary, I think had there not have been a VSC and a safety car, if we'd have just had racing until the end, I think we would have had, well, we obviously had the mix of strategies. So I don't think we would have had anything interesting happening at the front. I think Verstappen was always going to win that. But I think we would have had a really interesting fight further back with the whole Ferrari teammates and McLaren teammates as well, Piastri on the two-stopper. So I like it. We want to see that more often. I think it at least made the teams question what's going on with the tyres, no data, not sure what's going on. So I like it. Fair play to Pirelli for doing that, and I hope that we see that more often. I don't know if did you see whether they announced it at another track? I want to say it was maybe Canada or something. I feel like
I'm not sure. I know they obviously got the same tyres at Monaco, but that's Monaco, right? So it's a bit different, and we'll get onto that in a little while. But yeah, I'm not too sure. It was interesting though. You mentioned there about the running the mediums in qualifying. What I will say is the teams that did that, Aston Martin and George Russell. George Russell ended up with his worst race result of the season and went backwards in the race. Aston Martin ended up scoring no points despite getting both cars into Q3. So actually, with hindsight, it was a mistake. Although it may have even been quicker, they needed those mediums in the race because the softs they weren't even lasting one lap in qualifying. So they were never really going to last very long in the race. No one was using them. So actually, it was almost better to compromise qualifying, because obviously there's no points in qualifying. So yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting one. It's a fair point, I think, as well. On, you know, it probably is harsh to call it a failure because it definitely was a mixed up, interesting race, and I was enjoying it. It's just the fact that the one stop still seemed the best strategy, but maybe it was a long pit lane thing. Maybe that's all it was. And we did see enough people trying the two. I mean, literally about half the grid were on a two stop. So it was super mixed up. People running out of tyres was cool. People, you know, only having 10 lap fresher tyres, 15 lap fresher tyres, and they were way quicker. It was, yeah, okay, fair point. I retract my my previous statement. I don't think it was a failed experiment. I do think it was an improvement. I think the target though is to get the two stop the optimal, one stop is exceptional, and three stop if you're going to go a bit mental. You know what I mean? That should be the norm. Whereas it's still a bit too. The tyres still lasted a bit too long for that specific target, but again, it probably was more the long pit lane, I think, than the tyres. But the problem is that was their softest tyres they've got, which are designed for street circuits, which means street circuits are always going to be one stop, basically. And it doesn't mean they just only ever bring their softest tyres ever to every track. Like, it's just a bit, it's difficult, isn't it? They need to somehow build tyres that are like they were a few years ago, or bring back refueling. I don't know. We've got to somehow make sure that Imola or something like Imola happens all the time. Not, it's not an experiment. It's not the exception. That needs to be the norm, doesn't it?
Speaking of Imola all the time, this is the last year of its contract. Is it going to be, forget all the time, are we going to get it again? I mean, I feel like this is almost deja vu from Miami, where we always, not just us, pretty much everyone slates Miami up until that last race where we had a great weekend in general. And I feel like it's almost similar at Imola, where, okay, it's not like it wasn't a banger weekend, don't get me wrong. But as an F1 fan, I was entertained. I enjoyed it. Would I rewind and go and watch that again, knowing what would happen, whatever? Yeah, I would watch it. I think it was interesting. So, the track, though, a lot of people rightly praise Imola for being such a fun track to drive. Is it a good track for racing? Do you want to see Imola return for another year and moving forwards?
Yes, but I think it comes back to the thing of alternating tracks. Because take money out of it, and I know you can't take money out of it because it's F1, but humour me. Take money out of it. And I think if you alternate Monza and Imola, awesome. Both great tracks. I don't want to lose either of them off the calendar. Monza has got more history, and if I had to choose one of them, I probably would choose Monza, but I still wouldn't want to lose Imola. So if you alternate those, you've got an Italian Grand Prix, Monza 1 year, Imola next year, happy days. The problem with that right now, and why you've got to take money out of it, of course, is because you don't want to alternate great tracks and historic tracks like that while keeping tracks like Miami and Qatar and Jeddah and, all these tracks that have bought their way into F1 on it every single season, because then you end up with the rich but, maybe less passionate, should we call them, crowds and tracks on the calendar all the time. And then you alternate between actually genuinely good circuits. So take money out of it and alternate, maybe Jeddah and Bahrain could alternate. And that means then you don't feel so bad that Italy's also alternating. It means, maybe we can have a German Grand Prix again. We could maybe do Zandvoort and Nürburgring or Hockenheim or something like that. Like, it's so much opportunity there. Because, yes, I will be sad to lose Imola. I think it's got some fantastic history. It's obviously where Ayrton Senna sadly lost his life. That doesn't mean we should wait there forever, but it's just part of the history of Imola. And it is looking likely to be gone. Again, it's because of money. Bringing money back into it is realistically why. I don't think it's a clanger of a circuit. I think the racing is good enough because that straight's so long. You get enough DRS. I think it's good enough. It's the cars though, isn't it? Not the tracks to some extent. Monaco is almost so extreme that it probably is still the track for Monaco because it's been a long time since the cars have been a bit too good for Monaco. But it's the car. This year, somehow the teams have gotten back to the point where they can barely follow again, despite this entire rule set being designed around being able to follow. Fix the cars, and Imola's still a banger circuit, because no one's saying Imola's a bad circuit. It's got a great history. It's in a passionate country. It's a good circuit. The only real issue with it is that sometimes you can't follow very well. But as you said, the race we just saw, it was completely fine, just like Miami was. So I don't know. I hope to see it back, but realistically, I think it might be RIP to Imola. How would you feel if we never see Imola again?
I'm going to put words in your mouth from you alternating Italian tracks. You're basically saying drop Monza for a year, and I'm fuming. Absolutely fuming. But does that mean you'd rather have Monza every year forever and never Imola again? Is that what you're saying? If that's the options, alternate or completely get rid of Imola, what would you choose? I mean, I don't want that to be the option, but if I had to choose, I would get rid of Imola permanently and keep Monza, yes.
Wow.
I think so. I think Monza offers... what Monza offers in terms of atmosphere, because you've got to admit, even though it's still Italy, it's still different levels of atmosphere. Monza's a special venue. I feel like even non-Ferrari fans support Ferrari at Monza. Like I'm one of them. I'm in that boat. I was there last year, and I wanted to see the Ferrari drivers do well because it was just an unbelievable atmosphere. But that aside, I feel like the track also allows the potential for chaos and good racing as well. I know we have had boring Monza races in the past as well, but still, just my opinion. I would like to not see Imola dropped. I think. Do I want to see it every year? I'll put it this way: I'm not devastated to lose it. If that is the case, it looks like it is the case. But if it doesn't get renewed and we don't see it again, I won't be devastated like I would be if it was Monza, for example. But yeah, I do want to see it back. I like your idea of alternating. I mean, if it was possible, I'd love to see it alternate with, if we have to do one of the tracks in like the Middle East, like you said, like a Jeddah or something. Like hell yeah, like alternate with that. Like great. I don't want to alternate with a Monza or a Silverstone or whatever, but yeah.
All right, but realistically, we're ruling that out because of money. But what about the idea of bringing back the European Grand Prix, where it almost tours around? One year it's in Imola, the next year it's in Hockenheim, the next year it's in I don't know other Turkey, Istanbul. Do you know what I mean? That would be amazing. So at least we still get these circuits back occasionally, and it tours around the popular circuits. That's surely doable. F1.
Yes. Listen to us. That's it. We'll plan the next calendar. I am all for that. Yes, if we get 1 year we've got Imola, Hockenheim, whatever. Like absolutely. Like I'm fully down for that. It gives us more circuits, more variety, and obviously then kind of I guess gives the venues and fans a bit of a chance as well in those locations. So yeah, I'm all for that. 100%. Well, I guess we'll move on to talk about wheel-to-wheel racing because as we touched on earlier, there was a lot of overtakes, a lot of action across the whole Grand Prix. And I mean, I think the most contentious talking point was probably Leclerc and Albon turn one right at the end. So I think we'll kick things off with that. What did you make of it? Were you fuming at the FIA, or I suppose they didn't really kind of penalise Leclerc, but he probably would have been if Ferrari hadn't told him to swap positions. So yeah, what was your thoughts? Do you think it was the right decision?
I do think public opinion on this has been swayed a little bit by the fact it was Albon and Williams. Everyone likes an underdog story, etc. But I think the facts are the facts. It did look like Albon was ahead round the outside, and Charles Leclerc shoved him off into the gravel. It cost Albon a position to Hamilton, which potentially also cost him a shot at the podium. If he was able to overtake Leclerc there and then, would he been able to catch Piastri and overtake him? Maybe. It wasn't impossible. Hamilton got quite close and he had to wait another lap. So yeah, but it wasn't great, was it? I mean, to be honest, this is about the only bad bit of racing we saw. Honestly, we didn't really see any other, as far as I'm aware, really significant contact or dramatic moments or shoving off, or we didn't really see any of that. Probably partly because Max, the chief shover-offerer, was out in the front with no one to shove off. But it just wasn't great. Leclerc is actually low-key pretty much as aggressive as Max. We just haven't seen it as much. But it was just too much, I think. They're the same era. They do drive similarly. When you watch them race each other, they do race the same. It was just too much. It's just everything that's wrong with F1. The fact that was almost okay. Do you know what I mean? If he was 30 seconds further forward, completely fine. Fair enough. And it's like, no, that's not what we wanted. It was a great move around the outside of a tournament that's tricky to go round. He was wheel to wheel with him. That should have always been Leclerc has to leave him room. Just like Piastri, turn one, lap one, didn't go into the corner thinking I've got to give a guy room around the outside here, but still managed to do it to avoid himself crashing out. Leclerc should have done the same. If Albon found himself half a metre or a metre further ahead, Leclerc would have managed to give him room because he would have had to, otherwise he'd have been crashing out the race. So yeah, it's just bad. It's just bad racing. I'm glad he probably would have been punished. I'm glad he gave up the position. It's unfortunate it cost Albon a position in the meantime, but at least the right result was had in the end. But the fact that it was even up for debate is just, it's not good because it was a great move and it was a move that didn't deserve to be in the middle of the gravel. By the way, great recovery from the gravel though. Did you see him like full on rallying back onto the track, heading right towards the racing line as well, trying to obviously still maintain speed? I was like, oh no, is he about to wipe out Hamilton or something? But he didn't. He just came back on track, got it gathered up, and then got on his way. So fair play on that.
That's what you get with Carlos Sainz in the team. You've got Carlos Sainz teaching all the rally tricks. No, I think I do agree. I think we have the same kind of understanding when it comes to wheel-to-wheel racing, and I know a lot of viewers and listeners will agree as well. I think most people are on the side of Albon deserved space. I watched a really interesting breakdown. It was Anthony Davidson that did it, and Albon was ahead going into the corner, but at the apex, crucially, I think I'm pretty confident in saying that the current rule is that your mirror has to be in line with the front tire of the. So if you're the overtaking car, the mirror has to be at least alongside the front tires. And at the apex, when the frame was frozen, Albon's mirror was literally like it was minute. It was like 10 centimeters behind. It was nothing. And by the FIA rulebook, that is Leclerc's corner. So I think it was actually, it was underrated how smart it was from Ferrari, because don't forget, we had a safety car probably like less than 10 laps or whatever, 6 laps before that. So if Leclerc got even a 5-second penalty, bro goes down to like P8, P9. He loses loads of points, loads of positions. So Ferrari making that call was huge. I think it was a really smart call from Ferrari, because I don't know if he actually would have been penalised by that. I know it came up saying he was under investigation, and as far as I'm aware, that just didn't go any further because they gave the position back. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if he would have actually been penalised. I would have hoped that Leclerc would be penalised. I want to see Albon be left space there, and I want to see them go wheel to wheel, just like Piastri did. Big shout out to Piastri. Could have run Max off, could have run Lando off, gave him space around the outside. So I was a bit disappointed that Leclerc did that, but yeah, I don't know if he'd got penalised. I don't know. It was.
I'm actually not sure. I know last year's rules where you had to be maybe slightly ahead, didn't you? Like wheel to wheel, just very slightly ahead, or at least like bang on level sort of thing. If you even a little bit behind, you could have got shoved off around the outside. I know. I actually need to look this up, but I know the inside corner rules now, which we learned, by force in Jeddah with Piastri, is that your front wheel, if you're overtaking up the inside, your front wheel has to be alongside the mirror, isn't it? I don't know. I'm not too sure. It just seems a lot, doesn't it, to have to be, because a mirror to a front wheel is probably a half meter further ahead than wheel to wheel would be. It's just a bit. If that is the rule, it's a bit annoying that it's like you have to actually be a decent chunk ahead now to deserve any room by pulling off an amazing move. Do you know what I mean? Like wheel to wheel, I guess it's maybe harder to judge, but is fairer. But this is what I mean, is it shouldn't even be that. It should be behind that a little bit. It should be, if you're more or less wheel to wheel, so to stop the the millimeter judging of is he technically ahead. If you're more or less wheel to wheel, then just give them room, because you can see they're there. Yeah. Give them room. That should just be the rule. End of story. And if you're not more or less wheel to wheel, and then let's say your front wheels aren't even in line with their front wheels, you've not really pulled this off, so you would naturally back out anyway. That would almost promote the natural form of racing that modern drivers tend to do anyway. Is that if I'm not really, really very much alongside, I'm going to get shoved off. So if they've made it so you have to be even further ahead, I'm actually not a fan of that, because the era of people getting shoved off track needs to get in the bin.
We've mentioned this before, but yeah, exactly. And I think the problem is that some drivers clearly respect that in certain situations. So I'm sure if it was Piastri or anyone else right at the end of the race, they probably would have done the same thing with this current set of rules. But let's be honest, as you said, Leclerc, Verstappen, repeat offenders for this. Russell's done it on multiple occasions. It is the same drivers that tend to drive like this, and as a fan, it is really disappointing to see. Like, I don't care if my driver's doing particularly well. Like, for example, I like Lewis Hamilton. If he starts running people off just to hold the position, I'm not going to be celebrating that he's held the position. I'm going to be more like, I want to see some racing, like make it fair. So yeah.
I've just done a real quick Google, because we should probably know this, and it is a Gemini AI overview thing, but it does say that in 2025, the only real change around the outside they've made is, rather than just being level, you have to be slightly ahead. So I don't think it mentions the mirror thing. I think that is one for up the inside. But you watch the post show and Anthony Davidson and stuff, who would surely know this stuff. So I'm still not going to 100% confidently say this.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just to add as well, there was a part where Anthony Davidson was also saying there's an argument to say whether Leclerc was the overtaker or the defender because of how Albon head into the corner and how the stewards would deem it. So basically, it's a grey area. That's the point I'm highlighting, is that it was really smart by Ferrari, because we don't actually know whether I don't know if Leclerc would have got a penalty or not by the stewards' rules. It was very, very grey. So. Yeah, Leclerc was obviously fuming about it as well, but I just don't want to see that, And again, I mentioned it before, but I had a lot of respect for Piastri. I think he made a mistake turn one, lap one, and maybe was punished for it. Maybe he wouldn't have held off Max anyway because he was clearly rapid. Who knows? But certainly that lost in the race from that POV, along with McLaren's bad strategy. But aside from that, not only, as you said earlier, did he pull off a lot of overtakes, all well-measured, smart, calculated moves with minimal risk, but also fighting his teammate who was in a championship battle with, fighting Max again, turn one. Like, he left space around the outside. He was fair, especially with the Lando one, because Piastri took so much inside curb. He left Lando loads of space on the outside. I get it, it's his teammate, but look at Monza last year. That didn't stop him flying into the second chicane and almost running Lando off the track. So I got a lot of respect for Piastri with that type of racing, and I hope that we see more of that as the championship unfolds.
It was incredibly close, wasn't it, with Lando going on the outside there. Oscar was still kind of trying to fight it, which was maybe naive. That was incredibly close to being a big disaster for McLaren. Too close, honestly, because Lando was into the braking zone. Lando was pretty much completely ahead, and he's got so much older tyres, he can't massively outbrake him. It's not a big braking zone anyway.
Yeah,
I think although it was perfect in the end by both drivers, they very nearly touched, but I don't think they quite touched. But realistically, that was maybe not the smartest from Oscar Piastri, because he probably should have just gone, I do want to keep this, but it's not worth even risking, even just selfishly, my own race to do this. He's probably going to get me anyway. It's third place. It's still decent. Let's consolidate that rather than going almost all in for it. But look, it was clean in the end, so it's fine. It's just millimeters away from not being clean. But yeah, in general though, Piastri's racecraft is massively impressive. It really is. Like you said, the leaving room for Max on the outside, which he wasn't planning for before he hit the brakes. And I don't think anyone nobody expected Max, even Max fans, to end up genuinely being wheel to wheel at that apex. So but other than that, all those overtakes he had to make was amazing. And again, what strikes me with Piastri's racecraft is the calmness, just like we saw against Max in Miami. It's the not going to panic, not going to go for an outrageous move, which is what Lando tends to sort of fall foul of a little bit. He'll just go for a weird move and then just complain over the radio. Oscar doesn't do that. He just does the right moves at the right time and pulls them off perfectly. His racecraft, in my opinion, is genuinely possibly the best racecraft in F1 at the moment, which is a big statement to make. But for the evidence we've seen this season, he's been absolutely exemplary. It's been unbelievable. There's been no issues as such. He got the rule book perfectly in Jeddah when he shoved Max off, because apparently he had the right to do that. The rules are the rules. And everything about it has just been perfect. Every single move he was doing was bang on. It was a safe move, DRS, etc. He wasn't panicking. I think, honestly, in the end, obviously he'd be disappointed to finish P3 having started on pole, especially getting beaten by a teammate who started P4. But I think in the end, you go, well, look, I ran out of tyres. Maybe I chewed up my tyres too much trying to chase Max in the first stint. That forced me onto a two-stop. And then because there was two safety cars after that, I just ran out of tyres. There was nothing I could do. I actually think McLaren was somewhat fair to him in not boxing him under the last safety car. I think they could have done to make sure he's got fresh tyres, even if it's soft or whatever. But they didn't do that, which I think was better, because although he'd have been annoyed from early in the race losing track position to Lando, because they put Lando on what, with hindsight, was a better strategy. So that's obviously annoying. But the fact they gave him a chance at it in the end, even if he had worse tyres, I think was actually very fair for McLaren, because half the grid got the strategy wrong. It's not like it was just McLaren. Do
you have any idea if McLaren made that call or not? Because I was trying to catch that at the time watching the race. I don't know whether I'd like to think that Piastri got to make that call, because he was shafted on tyres at that point anyway, as you said. So C6 soft, even for however much it was, 9-10 laps, I don't think would have been the right call, even versus used hards. I mean, we'll never know, but I'm pretty sure that would have been a terrible tyre decision, hence why nobody touched it in the whole weekend. So I don't know. It's an interesting one. I think I'd like to think that was the right call anyway, and that Piastri wanted to stay out on used hards, but I don't really know. I don't suppose you know whether he made that call.
No,
or
I
not.
haven't looked at the team radio, but it was clearly the right decision because he still got P3, right? He lost one position. It was to his teammates. From McLaren's point of view, that was an absolute no-brainer. I think if things were different with Leclerc, maybe he would have been in a bit more trouble. But in the end, it was close, but they fundamentally got it right. So yeah, but I'm not too sure. I would like to think so, but also as a driver in the car, it's honestly, although we like the hero story of I'm coming in, I'm calling it. You know what I mean? In reality, the team have got so much more information than the drivers. They've got the exact gaps for everybody. They know exactly where you're going to come out. They know exact tyre life, what tyres you got left. They've just got all that, and they've got multiple people looking at it with the spare brain capacity to do it all, whereas a driver hasn't got any of those things. So I would like to think they consulted him, but it was probably fundamentally McLaren that made the call, and it was the right call because he wasn't that far away from still getting P2. He was a few laps he defended Norris for. So it wasn't impossible there that he could have done an unbelievable job and defended Lando on 17 lap older tyres. But yeah, just realistically, it was an uphill battle in the end. So I think he could be happy with P3. But yeah, just his racecraft is just. I mean, I'm genuinely. I'm going to call. I just am a Piastri fan these days. I know it's seemed that way, but I've not quite rung the bell. In fact, I did ring the bell, then I unrung the bell, and I'm re-ringing the bell. I'm now a Piastri fan. I'm a huge fan of everything.
Everyone's going to be shocked to hear that. Based all the weeks of you praising Piastri and saying, "No, this is going to come as crazy news to everyone."
Because he's good. Don't at me.
Right, let's move on. Let's add a bit of negativity, I reckon. Let's move on to a more negative segment, which is crashes. We had a few crashes this weekend. Colapinto, first race in the Alpine. What did we say last week? What were the exact words about? But we were talking about him crashing before in the previous.
I think we were trying to judge how many crashes and acceptable number of crashes over the next 5 races for him to be renewed, weren't we? I think we ended up saying 2. Maybe. Well, I think I sort of said more like 1, but he's already had 1. Literally the first session that matters, straight in the bin. Unbelievable. I kind of hope it's a one-off, but it is. I mean, it's quite predictable, isn't it? Realistically,
literally, as soon as he stacked it in the wall, I thought of the podcast straight away. I was like, you couldn't make this up. It's absolutely brilliant,
and I literally laughed out loud as well.
So let's say he does this next. Let's say he does this in Monaco. If he crashes in Monaco as well, what are we saying?
Do you know what? If he hadn't crashed at Imola, completely fine. It's very easy to crash at Monaco. But now he's crashed at Imola and he's supposedly only got a 5-race contract. He needs to keep it out of the wall in because you know what? Other than the crash, it was quite an impressive weekend. I know it was super mixed up in the race, but it was he had to be given team orders to let Gasly past. His qualifying lap in Q1 before he binned it was just just under 0.3 off Gasly, which is far from the worst gap we've seen this season. And he's only just come into the team. You know what I mean? He didn't have pre-season or anything. Even someone like Lawson and Tsunoda, yes, they've swapped teams, but they had the pre-season test and they had a couple races and they had more time, and it's also moving to a similar team. So I think it was a really impressive debut, other than the crash. But that's the key thing. Everyone's always said, yeah, Colapinto seems great, but he crashes too much, and it was exactly what we saw this weekend. So yeah, he's got to not crash in Monaco, because I think if he doesn't crash in Monaco, that's quite impressive. Guy, it's known for crashing, and only his second race, not crashing Monaco would be impressive more than it would be unimpressive for him to crash. That's a really badly worded statement, but hopefully 1% of the people listening understood it.
Yeah, I'm clearly not in charge of the finances at Alpine, so I will say that I would rather they take on a driver that, in my opinion, is quicker than Doohan from based on track record and what we've seen so far, but clearly comes with the big risk and error prone based on the amount of crashes he's had. I'd rather see that, because clearly he's got a lot of potential. If he's a quick driver, surely you want to work with that. Okay, if he's making mistakes, we need to iron those out. Don't forget how many mistakes Max made when he came onto the scene. He was crashing with other drivers, and I mean, okay, I'm not trying to compare with Max, because that is clearly a very high benchmark. But you get my point. It's you can see that he's quick. Give him a bit of time. Hopefully he beds in, gets used to the car a bit as well, because you can also put it down to being his first race in a different car. But yeah, ultimately, I think it was turn 2 or 3. I want to say it was turn 2 where he just took way too much curb, and I think he said after that it was just unnecessary. He just didn't need to do that. I think his lap was already good enough to get through in qualifying as well, and then. Yeah, still did that. So
what I will say, it was a classic rookie error. Like, as far as I'm aware, not raced at Imola before, certainly not on F1 cars. And, you know, his first race weekend for the team, he only had 3 practice sessions. He maybe hadn't had a chance to properly explore that curb. It's qualifying. He's trying to push. It's not like he did anything outrageously bad. It was just a classic rookie error. So, yeah I don't know. It's funny because he's known for it. But actually, I think it's not too bad. I think we can forgive him. But if he crashes again at Monaco, even though it's easy to crash at Monaco, I think then, you know, if he has supposedly only got a 5-race contract, race 2 out of 5, he's already crashed twice. It's not good, is it? We'll see.
Can you forgive Yuki Tsunoda?
I don't know. Yuki's was a big one, wasn't it? Yuki's was a big crash.
First lap Q1.
First lap Q1, ended up rolling the car. Like, it's just the pressure, isn't it, man? Like, that situation, that seat's a bit cursed. We all know it. Pressure to perform. I don't know. I think he had a good recovery. You know, the crash aside, I think he had a good recovery. Yeah, but the crash itself, I'm not going to say it's unforgivable. Everybody crashes sometimes. And even he's only had, was now his 5th race in the team, I think.
Yeah.
So, just about, like, I guess, sometimes these things happen, but it's not great, is it? It's not good news, no matter how you cut it. But at least in the race, he recovered quite well. I'm interested to see how he does next time. If he can perform a bit better in that car that's got a slightly wider operating window now. Because, he's just... At the moment, though, it's got to be said, Tsunoda... I'm not going to say he isn't much better than Lawson, because he is doing better than Lawson, but that's such a low bar. He's still not good enough, is he, so far, from what we've seen? That's not good enough in that car.
I look back and I'm like, Sergio Perez, anyone? You know, well, all of a sudden, he's not looking that badly, is he? I mean, don't get me wrong, he didn't shower himself with praise before. I get that. We've covered it in much detail in the past, but I mean, have any of his replacements been, you know, enough to say, well, getting rid of Checo was the right decision? I mean, yeah, I think not touching on the second seat, because we talked about the second seat for forever, but yeah, I think Yuki's comeback in the race was interesting, and particularly what you just mentioned there about Max's car and just the Red Bull in general, just being a faster package moving forwards will be interesting to see, because I think then that puts more pressure on Yuki. I almost feel like when you look at Miami and some previous races, you can kind of say, well, you know, we know Yuki's not there up to Max's standard, and even at Max's standard, the car is kind of bad. So, you know, at least you can kind of forgive him for that. Whereas, obviously, if he's got a car that Max is dominating races with, then you have to be scoring points. You know, that point has to be a minimum expectation if you've got a car that is like the fastest or one of the fastest. So,
yeah, I mean, so just on that, actually, let's just touch on, you know, you mentioned Sergio Perez there. I don't want to go too deep into the Red Bull second seat because it's been talked about to death, but I've put together a massively over-engineered spreadsheet over the last couple of weeks for a main channel video. And so I've got here at a glance how Max has done compared to his teammates, right? So first season, 2015, Toro Rosso, he, in qualifying, beat Sainz by half a second a lap on average. 2016, when he moved to the Red Bull, he got beaten, and this is the only teammate that's ever beaten Max on average in qualifying. He got beaten by Daniel Ricciardo, half a second. But that was his first season in Red Bull. Every season since then, that was 2016, every season since then, he's beaten his teammate in average on qualifying. So Ricciardo next season, on average, out-qualified him by half a second. Ricciardo next season, 2018, on average, out-qualified him by 0.3. Then Gasly went to Red Bull in 2019, out-qualified Gasly by almost 0.7 of a second on average. 2020 was Alex Albon's turn, out-qualified him by just under 0.6 of a second on average in qualifying. Then you had the Perez era, which is the bit I want to bring up, because you mentioned, you know, maybe bring back Perez. Perez was there for 4 years, by the way. It didn't feel like that long, but that's a long time.
Yeah, wow.
First season, Max out-qualified him by 0.3 on average. Not too bad. The closest it's been since, well, really, Daniel Ricciardo. Next season, though, half a second. Season after that, similar, about half a second. Season after that, which was last season, 2024, almost 0.7 of a second. And in fact, the biggest delta that Max has ever had to any teammate was 2024, Sergio Perez. So I don't think it's quite bring back Perez time, because Actually, I've still got listed as Lawson here, but Lawson on average. Oh, actually, I haven't got the information easily because it's my spreadsheet only showing Lawson for all 7 races. He's out qualified by Lawson by half a second on average across the first 7 races of the season. But obviously, Lawson's been in the V Cup for some of that, so it's not perfect. But so I don't think it's bring back Perez time, but Tsunoda has to do better.
No, and no, I'm not saying bring back Perez. That would be ridiculous.
You did say bring back Perez though, pretty much.
I'd just like to clarify what I meant was. If you're Red Bull at this point, are you looking at that decision and thinking, was this worth a risk given the mess that we've gone through, or should we have just kept him on? I still think that getting rid of Perez was the right decision, but clearly they've got more fundamental issues that is affecting every driver that's stepping into that seat. And clearly Lawson and Tsunoda, I give Tsunoda time, of course, because we know Tsunoda can drive. We know he did some very good things in that V-Carb. And I'm sure if he goes back to the V-Carb at any point, I'm sure he'll continue to do that because he is a good driver, clearly. But yeah, whatever's going on there, they need to get on top of. I think back to the point of Yuki, though, him getting into the points starting from, I think it was just plumb last, right? Oh, pit lane, I think he started.
Pit lane.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So fair play. I mean, look, he clearly needed the safety car situation for that, but still, he still had to do it. So fair play to him. I think he's definitely helped his case for that, but we're going to need to see less crashes from him now moving forwards. And we're going to need to see consistent points if that Red Bull has improved. So I think Monaco is going to be a massive test. I think that almost kind of leads us nicely onto Monaco next weekend, because you've got Yuki Tsunoda now, who, I mean, we know Max is going to do well at Monaco, don't we? It's not going to be a surprise to see him up there in quali. It's Max. And if there's any kind of deficit to Max, like there've been in previous races, Yuki's going to really struggle at Monaco. That's not the track to do that. And I also want to, I want to move on now to talk about Hamilton, because we specifically didn't talk about him before in our kind of like wheel to wheel racing segment, because he had a really good race, P12 to P4, pulled off some good overtakes. Is this going to be a bit of a turning point for Hamilton now? I saw the scenes after the race and how he was with all of his like mechanics and fans and everything. He was buzzing. It almost looked like, that kind of like 2020 Mercedes era Hamilton when he's just on top of the world and loving life with the fans and everything. And I'm looking at it now thinking, well, okay, you've beaten your teammate. Forget the strategy difference, whatever. You've beaten your teammate. You're on a high. Hamilton in the current generation, I don't have his qualifying record to hand, but from memory, from someone that likes and follows Hamilton, I don't think he's done very well at Monaco for a while in terms of qualifying versus his teammate and that kind of thing. So, I'm kind of looking at it thinking Leclerc won Monaco last year, his home race as well. I think this weekend at Monaco is going to be a massive, massive, statement maybe for Lewis. If he somehow beats Leclerc or out-qualifies him, whatever, at Monaco, that will be massive for him at Ferrari, I feel like.
Well, that would be the most recent win of the Monaco Grand Prix. Charles won it last season, so if Lewis can beat him, that will be mega impressive. I don't know. I think Lewis said this after China that maybe I've found something with the car, I found the setup direction, whatever. He said the same thing after Imola. We'll see whether that's true this time or whether it is just a case of the form fluctuating. It was a good day in Imola. Clearly, qualifying obviously was terrible, but terrible for both drivers. So yeah, just Ferrari's form is the bigger issue, to be honest. I don't think Lewis went there expecting to get knocked out in Q2 on genuine pace, which was quite incredible. But it was a good comeback drive from Lewis. I did really enjoy seeing him with the fans and stuff, like you said, almost like it's Mercedes days, except for it was for P4, not P1.
Yeah.
But I don't know. We'll see. It was a good recovery drive. It took him a long time to get past Antonelli. And what I really liked afterwards, and this shows his experience, is after the safety cars. Or the first safety car when he went to mediums, he got past Antonelli and whoever was in front of Antonelli, but he came with the radio and they said, great race, some awesome moves. And then he said, yeah, but I had to use a lot of my tyres to do that, that shows his experience. He knows I'm abusing this tyre. It's going to die quickly. But if I do that and I get past him, it'd be worth it. And that's exactly what he did. He abused the tyres to get past him, but he was aware that he was doing it. And honestly, I think to some extent that Piastri has still got that to learn a little bit. He's learned a lot this season compared to last, but Piastri's not quite there yet. He does keep munching through, particularly medium tyres, interestingly, not so much hards. But the fact that Hamilton knew that was the forefront of his mind. Yeah, but I've munched through my tyres a bit to do that. I really enjoyed that, and that shows the experience. But yeah, going to Monaco, we'll see. It's so much about confidence in the car, isn't it? The barriers are so close. You've got to be so confident in the car underneath you. It's got to be said, with the form so far this season, Max has got to be a shoo-in for pole position, surely. He's got so much confidence in that car, especially as it's apparently got a wider setup window now. And the McLaren guys seem to regularly not quite be able to get it done in quali. One of them tends to not quite get it bang on at least once per weekend. So yeah, we'll see. I mean, would be imagine if Hamilton gets pole in Monaco. That would be so the first win for Ferrari, Leclerc's backyard. It'd be huge, amazing. But yeah, not very likely.
It's really interesting listening to Hamilton's comments. I don't know whether it was like after quali or after the race. But Hamilton came out and said, we don't have a bad car. Like, the car is good. Like, he said, the package we've got is good. It's a fast car. But the big issue with it is how sensitive it is in the tire temperature window. Hamilton saying that it's so difficult to prep the car. And as you know, and for any viewers and listeners that don't know, current F1 cars, when it comes to qualifying, there's such small temperature windows that the tires need to be in for the perfect operating window, and that includes how much do you push in sector 1. If you over push and overheat your tires, you ruin your lap, because come sector 3 you then have a bad sector 3. So tire temperatures and managing the tires is crucial in qualifying, obviously the race too, but more so in qualifying for actually even doing a decent lap. And that is where Ferrari's fallen down recently. Imola was a perfect example of that. They had a good car at Imola. I would have loved to have seen how fast the car actually was. Hamilton was obviously closing in on Piastri. I know there's a massive tyre offset, of course, but I think Ferrari were probably quite underrated in terms of how quick their car was at Imola. But we didn't really see that because of the issue they had in quali that put them all the way down. So yeah, if they do that in Monaco, they're screwed, simply put. You can't come back from 11th, 12th at Monaco if you haven't got your tyres in the right window. So it's going to be really interesting. You hit the nail on the head there about Monaco being all about confidence, and the fact that Hamilton's qualifying particularly has been so poor, regardless of whether it's tyre issues or whatever, is going to make Monaco a real challenge. So off the back of Imola, I personally hope we see a good result from Hamilton and also just both Ferraris in general. But let's see. I think you mentioned the McLarens there. That's a really interesting one. If we see a classic McLaren mistake at Monaco, there's no coming back from that. You make a small mistake at Monaco, it's GG. It's. I'm not saying crash, but I'm saying like that's you lose 3-4 positions in quali. You're basically done in the race, right? So we've obviously got the mandatory 2-stop coming in. Maybe that could kind of put my words, what I'm saying, in the mud a bit. Maybe I hope I'm wrong. I hope that we'll see some position changes in the race. But if history is anything to go by, then yeah, I agree. Max surely favourite for pole and therefore the race win. If you're Lando or Oscar, you're like, right, I've got to not make mistakes. Simply put.
Well, obviously the key thing we've got for Monaco is a mandatory 2-stop. That's the big talking point that we haven't even mentioned yet. Yeah, because that's going to mix things up. Someone had a really interesting theory earlier. They said, what if there's a lap 1 safety car? Does the entire field just come and pit twice in a row, then go to hards and go to the end? It's possible at Monaco. I don't know. It wouldn't normally be the right strategy, but with a mandatory 2-stop, I don't know. Maybe. I would kind of sort of hope we do get that, because if, let's say Max does get pole, if you're Max and there's a lap 1 safety car, because you're at the front, you can't guarantee that everyone behind is going to pit, and it's so crucial to get that clear air. Because Max realistically will have the pace to probably pull a gap to, let's say, P5 maybe, before pitting into that gap. So like worst case scenario, Max will get P5. So he can't risk boxing lap 1. But some of the other guys might be able to, particularly some of those sort of, maybe someone like Aston Martin, there's sort of midfield-ish runners that maybe are more willing to take a risk and see if it works out for them. Because if you're at the back, obviously you do it, but you're also then going to be in so much dirty air that it's not really going to benefit you at the back. It's those sort of midfield runners. Let's say Aston Martin roll the dice from 9th and 10th. and then everyone else behind them also rolls the dice. Suddenly Aston Martin in 9th and 10th, having done their mandatory pit stop, or at least one of their mandatory pit stops, and then everyone else in front hasn't. So that's an intriguing one. But just in general, though, I do like this. I do like this 2-stop idea. I think it's a bit of a basic, blunt solution, for being completely honest. I know we did speak about this before when it first got announced, but I prefer to do this than do nothing. But I just, there probably was better at least just make them use all 3 compounds or something like that. That still mandates a 2-stop, but it guarantees that they have to use, maybe the softs, which might be terrible at Monaco. They probably won't because it's Monaco, but maybe, we'll see. Or the pit stops have to be more than 5 laps apart even. Add a bit of nuance to it so they can't do a double stop on lap 1 or maybe even a last lap pit stop. I think there's a definite case that it could be a bit farcical with this because it's so open. Yes. The only mandatory thing is 2 stops. So we'll see.
I think the issue though with what you were saying as well is as soon as you start throwing in things that are so far-fetched versus other races like, you pitting within certain windows and stuff, it just, for me, as an F1 fan, the first thing I say is, well, just bin this race. Well, what's the point? If
I forgot how much you hate Monaco.
If the race is that bad that you're needing to force these circumstances, there is something fundamentally wrong. Simple as that. Why else are we doing it, right? So I'm still. Look, I'm excited for Monaco. I'm sat here right now, a week before Monaco. I'm buzzing for it, especially qualifying, best qualifying session of the year. I'm excited for it. Am I expecting a good race? Absolutely not. I'm still going to watch it. I'm going to sit there through the whole thing, and I'm going to hope for rain, and I'm going to hope for chaos and whatever else. And I hope that we're sat here in a week's time, and I'm eating my words, saying, "Keep Monaco, amazing track, happy days." But right now, I am expecting a very boring race, as I'm sure most others are as well.
You are to Monaco what Lando is to me. We're the same. You will never go for it in Monaco. I don't know. We covered this before. Obviously, the cars are the problem, not the track. I don't think that means you can't just fix the cars overnight. I just think Monaco is another one of those tracks that's got such amazing history. It's the original glitz and glamour race. We've got a few of them now. We got Vegas, we got Miami and stuff. We got a few of them, but Monaco is it's the epitome of Formula One. It's the glitz and glamour track for Formula One. I think, yes, maybe eventually you do have to make a tough decision, but it's the showpiece. It's the crown in the jewel. There's almost an art to having these massive cars around such a tiny track. Yes, it means the racing is terrible. I'm not saying that means it's perfect and doesn't need changing. I would much rather see 100 kilo lighter cars, smaller cars that they can actually follow closer and race better. Of course, I would prefer that. I'm just personally of the view that unless you're talking about making an entire calendar full of Monacos, then yes, something's wrong. One track a year that we know you can't overtake, it's still worth it because we know that's what makes it the best qualifying of the year. So let's go to the other extreme end and say suddenly you build cars that can follow really easily and every track is a banger. No track is terrible except for Monaco because it's still just too small for the cars. That is still the rest of the qualifying sessions don't mean anything. The Monaco qualifying session would be so good by comparison. So it's mainly about qualifying, but then the race is still that jeopardy, isn't there? You still having to do 78 laps skimming the barriers. You still got to make no mistakes. The problem is the cars are too good these days. Of course, they're so heavy and they're so reliable that we get less mistakes now than we ever have before. The DNF rate is unbelievably low right now. I mean, we used to get more than half the field DNFing every single race way back in the day. So. I'm not calling it for it to be binned, but I'm also not saying it's perfect. I like this 2-stop idea. I think if you sort of accept what I'm saying and what F1 clearly feels, you can't get rid of Monaco. Okay, we can't get rid of Monaco. We can't change the cars overnight. What do we do? This 2-stop idea, I think, is worth trying. And I personally really wish F1 tried things like this more. If something's not working, try something else, especially on the tracks that got alternative layouts. Try a different layout. Stuff like this. Be more experimental to some extent. I think you can tweak things without it detracting from being fundamentally F1. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
I because of the 2-stop in particular, I'm actually really quite excited for Monaco.
I do agree with the whole approach of trying to fix these kind of tracks and races. I think it's good. I think it's positive, both from the F1 side and also Pirelli as well, with the tires. So yeah, fair play. I don't think there's any amount of words that we can throw at each other that's going to persuade one another to change our viewpoint on that. But hey, this just kind of sets up an exciting race weekend next week. So I look forward to being sat here with you next week and kind of debating whether it was a terrible or good race. I hope it's the latter. I hope it's a good race. But yeah, I hope
content creator on me wants a farcical race. I want it to be like everyone did 2 stops in the first 2 laps and then nobody stopped after that. Like just for the talking tires, points,
mate. Wets, inters, get them all on.
Yeah.
No, but look, guys, I hope you've enjoyed the watching and listening today. A reminder as well, you can catch us on all listening platforms: Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Music as well. And for viewers on YouTube, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you've enjoyed, as always. We'll catch you guys next week for an episode on Monaco.